Did you know that the most important memories of your life are the ones you'll never be able to remember? You were born. You opened your eyes for the very first time. You heard your mother's voice for the first time. You began seeing the world for the very first time. You smiled for the first time. You cried. You tasted food for the first time. You learned to walk. You learned to speak. Every one of those moments helped shape the person you are today. And yet, today, you can't remember a single moment from that time. Not even one. But why? Were you simply too young? Was your brain incapable of forming any memories at all? Were you simply too young? Was your brain incapable of forming any memories at all? Or have we misunderstood this entire mystery all along? Because science now says the real story is completely different. Your infant brain was doing its job perfectly. It was watching. It was learning. And every single day, it was storing new experiences. So here's the question. If those memories were truly created, then where have they all gone? Scientists spent more than 100 years searching for the answer to that one question. And the answer isn't just about your memory. It explains how a baby slowly becomes you. In 1905, Sigmund Freud gave this mystery a name for the very first time: infantile amnesia. For many years, everyone believed the explanation was simple. Babies just couldn't form memories yet. But that isn't true. Today, we know for certain that babies can form memories. They can learn something new and remember it later. So the question comes back once again. If babies really can form memories, then where do all of those memories go when they grow up? The first major clue came from a small study in the 1980s. It looked incredibly simple, but its results completely changed what scientists believed. Psychologist Carolyn Rovi Collier at Rutgers University conducted an astonishingly simple experiment. She tied a ribbon to a baby's foot. The other end of the ribbon was attached to a toy hanging above the crib. Within a very short time, the babies figured it out. Every time they kicked their leg, the toy moved. They kept kicking again and again because they had learned that their actions produced a result. But the real surprise was still waiting. A few days later, the same babies were brought back into the room, but this time they weren't taught anything new. And then what happened? Surprised every scientist in the room. The babies immediately started kicking their legs again. No one reminded them. No one gave them any instructions. And yet, they tried to move the toy exactly as they had before. Why? Because they remembered the earlier experience. They knew that kicking their leg would make the toy move. Even babies as young as 2 months old were able to retain that memory for several days. And babies who were 6 months old could remember it for several weeks. That makes one thing clear. Babies can learn. They can form memories, and when needed, they can use those memories. So the question comes back once again. If babies really can form memories, then where do all of those memories go when they grow up? For decades, scientists searched for the answer to this question, but no explanation could fully account for the entire picture. Then, little by little, they began to realize that the answer might not lie in the memories themselves, but in the very machine that creates them. A tiny structure deep inside your brain calling the hippocampus. This small structure helps turn your everyday experiences into long-term memories. Whether you talked to someone, celebrated a birthday, or walked in the rain, this is where those moments begin their journey into memory. But there was one problem. In babies, this structure wasn't fully developed yet. Many of its most important connections were still being built. So although they could form memories for a short time, they couldn't hold on to them for years the way adults can. At first, it sounds like the mystery has finally been solved. But was it really? Because scientists quickly realized this explanation wasn't the complete answer either. And that's exactly where an even more astonishing discovery begins, one that completely changed our understanding of infant memory. For a long time, scientists believed they had almost solved the mystery, but one question still remained unanswered. And that question was, if an immature hippocampus was the only reason, then how could some childhood memories survive for so long? That question forced scientists to dig even deeper. And that's where a surprising new idea emerged. Maybe the problem isn't the brain's ability to create memories. Maybe the problem happens after they're created. In 2014, two researchers at Toronto's Hospital for Sick Children, Sheena Joslin and Paul Franklin, began investigating this very question. Their question sounded strange, but if it turned out to be true, it could completely change the answer to the mystery. The question was, could the very process that helps your brain grow also be erasing your earliest memories? As unbelievable as it sounds, there was solid scientific reasoning behind it. During the first few years of your life, your brain produces new neurons at an astonishing rate. This process is called neurogenesis, and it's essential for your brain's normal development. Every day, countless new neurons become integrated into existing neural networks. Your brain is constantly rebuilding itself. But then another question arises. If new neurons keep making room for themselves within older circuits, then what happens to the connections that were already there? And if those connections are where your memories are stored, could those memories change as well? To test this idea, the researchers conducted an experiment, not on humans, but on mice. First, they artificially increased the number of new neurons in the brains of adult mice. Then, they waited. The results were astonishing. The mice began forgetting things they had previously learned much faster than before. Then, they performed the opposite experiment. They slowed down the production of new neurons in the brains of young mice. This time, the young mice were able to retain their older memories for much longer than normal. One experiment pointed in the same direction from both sides. The faster the brain rebuilt itself, the harder it became to hold on to old memories. Was this finally the answer scientists had been searching for all these years? Or was there still one more crucial piece of the mystery left to uncover? The findings were later published in the journal Science, and those results opened the door to an entirely new possibility for scientists. Maybe it's not true that your infant brain couldn't form memories. Instead, your brain was changing so rapidly that those memories simply couldn't survive. In other words, your brain wasn't breaking down. Your brain was being built. And in the middle of that construction, many of your earliest memories were being lost. As surprising as it sounds, the very process that was making you smarter may also have been preventing your earliest memories from lasting. So, has the mystery finally been solved? Not completely, because even here, one big question still remained unanswered. If the production of new neurons was the only reason, then why do our earliest memories usually begin no earlier than the age of 3 or 4? As researchers searched for the answer, they realized that having a brain alone isn't enough to create lasting memories. Something else is needed. You need a sense of me. Psychologists Mark Howe and Mary Courage argue that to create lasting autobiographical memories, a person first needs a clear sense of self. In other words, you have to understand this is happening to me. This experience is mine. But early in life, babies haven't yet learned to recognize themselves as separate individuals. How do we know that? For many years, psychologists have used a very simple experiment to find out. A small spot of colored paint is placed on a baby's nose. Then the baby is placed in front of a mirror. Most babies younger than 18 months think the reflection in the mirror is another child. They don't touch the mark on their own nose because they still don't realize that the child they're looking at in the mirror is actually themselves. But somewhere between 18 and 24 months of age, that behavior begins to change. Now the babies reach up and touch the mark on their own nose because, for the first time, they begin to realize the child they're looking at in the mirror isn't someone else. It's me. What's fascinating is that this period almost perfectly matches the time when people's first lasting personal memories begin to appear. So, is having memories alone not enough? Before a memory can become my memory, does the me have to exist first? And if that's true, then the final piece of this mystery has yet to reveal itself. But even here, the story doesn't end, because scientists realized that one more important piece was still missing. What was it? Language. Developmental psychologist Catherine Nelson spent many years studying children's memories. According to her, language isn't just for talking about our memories. It also helps organize them. When you can give an experience a name and tell someone about it, that memory becomes much more firmly embedded in your brain. But before babies learn to speak, their experiences exist only as scattered feelings, sounds, lights, and images. They can be experienced, but they can't yet be turned into a story. So here's the question. If an experience can't even be put into words, can it really survive for many years? As babies learn to speak and begin talking with their parents about past experiences, that's when their long-term memories begin to become much more stable. In other words, language doesn't create memories, but it plays a major role in preserving them. Another fascinating observation has made this idea even stronger. Psychologist Chi Wang found that people around the world don't all have their first memories at the same age. In families where parents talk more often with their children about past experiences from an early age, those children tend to remember events from an earlier stage of childhood when they grow up. On the other hand, in cultures where people talk less about personal experiences, people's earliest memories usually begin later in life. In other words, your memories aren't shaped only by your brain, they're also shaped by the people around you. Now let's look at the whole picture together. At first, your hippocampus wasn't fully developed. Then, new neurons began forming rapidly, and your brain started rebuilding itself. At the same time, your sense of who you were was still developing. And without language, it was difficult to organize those experiences into lasting memories. So the first years of your life weren't lost for just one reason. Many different processes were working together, and that's why your earliest years are almost completely hidden from memory today. But perhaps the most beautiful truth is this: your brain was doing something far more important than simply holding on to memories. It was slowly creating the person you know today as me. So the first years of your life were never a mistake. Your brain was working exactly the way it was supposed to. Before it could preserve memories, it had one even more important job to finish. What was that? To slowly transform the rapidly changing brain of a baby into a brain capable of holding on to a lifetime of memories. So your earliest experiences were never meaningless. They were the very foundation of your future. You may not remember them, but their influence is still with you today. Learning to walk, learning to speak, learning to recognize faces, feeling safety and love. Every one of those experiences changed who you became. So here's the question: if those memories are gone, did they still shape the person you are today? Science says the answer is probably yes, because not every experience survives as a story. Some experiences change the way you think, learn, and see the world. In other words, your earliest years were never truly lost. They are still inside you, just in a different form. Maybe that's why we can never remember our earliest memories, because during that time, your brain was doing something far greater than simply storing memories. It was slowly creating the person you know today as me. And perhaps that's the most beautiful answer to this entire mystery. You can't remember your childhood because your brain wasn't busy preserving your past. It was busy building your future. And that future is the person you are today. So maybe the most important story of your life is the one you'll never be able to remember. You can't remember a single scene from that time. You can't remember a single sound. You can't even remember a single feeling. And yet, those very experiences slowly shaped your brain. They taught you. They changed you. Maybe that's why our earliest years don't live on in our memories. They live on within us. And that's the strangest part of infantile amnesia. You can't remember your childhood, but your childhood still remembers you. In every habit you have, every lesson you've learned, every reaction you make, and in every part of the person you are today. Maybe that's why the most important memories don't always have to be remembered. Some memories aren't meant to be remembered. Some memories are meant to build you, and they finished that job a long time ago.